I'm going on this video back to the book of Job. I have been working through Job and we worked our way up to chapter 31. We're looking at the Hebrew with translation in English, some grammar, and then commentary. So as we come to this point in the narrative, Job believes he deserves a better fate than he has been given in life and by God. He has declared his upright character as a public official in chapter 29. Now he vindicates his character in his private life. In verses 1 to 4, he asserts that he has guarded himself against sensual sin. So we pick it up in verse 1, and it reads in 31:1, Berit karati le'enai. I made a covenant with my eyes. Berit is the Cal perfect first person singular from barat. We should probably read this bariti. I made my covenant, or I cut my covenant with my eyes. Verse the second clause, Uma et bonain al betula. How then shall I look upon a virgin? Et bonain is a polel, hit polel, imperfect first common singular from the root to look upon, al betula, meaning virgin. How then should I look upon a virgin? So he's talking about looking upon a virgin with lust. Job put even his thoughts of lust out of his mind by forbidding his eyes to lead him into temptation. And so often the eyes, there is the lust of the eyes, the Bible speaks of. And Job was willing to remove that, not to even look at what is wrong. And how we can learn by reading this verse about what the Lord would have his believers to do. And by the way, this whole chapter is one of the most outstanding in the whole book of Job, in that it describes what a righteous man should look like. And so in verse 2, he continues, Uma chelek olaha miba'al, or mima'al, excuse me. For what would be the portion of God from above? Chelek, Eloah, two nouns in construct. What would be the portion of God from above? The Nachalat Shaddai, Mimeromim, and the inheritance or heritage of the Almighty from on high. And so here in verse 2, had he allowed his senses to lead him into adultery, he knew that God would have punished him. So he took a strict approach to protect himself. Notice verse 3, Halo aid le'aval, is it not calamity to the unrighteous? V'necher lepo'elei avon, and is it not disaster to the workers of iniquity? Po'ale is from pa'al, meaning to do or to work. It's a cow participle, masculine plural, in construct with aven, for the workers of iniquity. Is not it calamitous for the unrighteous to have those kind of wrong thoughts in his mind? Knowing that God sees everything, Job knew that if he had committed adultery, he would have been destroyed by God and judged by God. And he mentions this then in verse 4. Hello, hu yereh derachai. Does he not see my ways? V'cho se'adei yispur. And all of my steps, does he not count? Yereh is from the root ra'ah. It's a cow imperfect, third masculine singular, a lamed hey verb. And who here is emphatic, a personal pronoun. Does not he see my ways? And even all of my steps, does not he count? Yispor from safar, to count, cow imperfect, third masculine singular. Does he not keep track? People buy machines today where they walk that will keep track of how many steps they take. And I look at this, and he's saying God is keeping track of my steps continually and what I'm doing in my life. And so we move on then to the verse 5. Im halakti im shav. If I have walked with vanity, halakti is from halak. It is the cow perfect first person singular. If I have walked with vanity, v'tachash al mirma ragli, and my foot has hurried unto deceit. If my foot hurried unto deceit, or if I walk with vanity. Again, Job continues to tell of ways that he has abstained from evil. He has not pursued vanity or deceit in his life. And what a challenge to us today to follow that. And as a Christian, I read this and I see this reiterated in the teaching of Jesus in the New Testament. And then he continues in the next verse. Let me yiskaleni mimozone tzedek. Let me be weighed in the balance. Yiskaleni is the cow imperfect, third masculine singular from shakal, with a pronominal suffix in the ni here. Let me be weighed in the balance of justice, if that's the case. And then he continues, V'yeda Eloah tumati, that God may know my integrity. Yeda is from historically vada, a pei vav verb. The vav has dropped out, and we have compensatory lengthening under the yod. So that's why we have yivda becoming yeda here, a cow imperfect third masculine singular. Then that God may know my integrity. Let me be weighed in the balance. In this verse, Job parenthetically asked to be weighed on scales or in scales which show him to be innocent and not guilty. And so in verse 7, he continues, Im tete ashuri mini ha-darak, if my step has turned from the way or out of the way that God wants him to work or to live. Titain is from nata, it's the cow imperfect, third feminine singular, and it's a pay-noon verb, tinte becoming tit with the doubling of the tet. So if my step turn mini hadarik from the way, v'achar einai halak libi, and after my eyes, my heart walked. In other words, if my mind and heart walked according to my eyes, that I sin with my eyes. Jesus taught even to look upon a woman to lust is committing adultery in the heart. So the New Testament carries this further in the teaching of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then, uvechapai davak me'um. And if any type of spot under my hands, if a spot has cleaved, davak. Notice here we have davak, that's simply the cow perfect, third masculine singular. And if in my hands, kaf, and then we have a plural, first person singular suffix put on a plural noun. So if my hands has cleaved to any spot, here in verse 7, this verse continues the thought of verse 5, dealing with the pathway. If he has coveted the things which his eyes have seen, then he wishes a curse upon himself. In other words, if I have done this, the implication is let God judge me. And then in verse 8, Ezra v'acher yochel. For let me sow, or I will sow, and let another eat. Ezra is the cohortative, the cow imperfect, first common singular from zara, and let another eat. Yochel is the cow imperfect, third person singular from achal. V'tzeh sa'ai yeshorashu. Indeed, let the produce of my field be rooted out. Let my produce, speaking of the imagery, it seems, of a field here, let it be rooted out. And here, Yeshorashu, we have a pual, imperfect, third common plural, a third masculine plural from sharash. So let it be rooted out. These are the curses then, which he places upon himself if he has done the sins mentioned in verses 5 to 7. Another should eat what he has sown, and the produce of his field should be rooted up. And so now Job goes on after talking about the innocency of his eyes, to speak about his innocency of adultery in verses 9 to 12. Im niftach libi al isha. If my heart has been opened unto a woman, enticed unto a woman. The root here is patach. It's the nifal perfect. If my heart has, third feminine singular from patach. So if my heart has been open, or I'm sorry, third masculine singular, I should say, from patach. So if my heart, if it has been open unto a woman, and I have lain in wait at my neighbor's door, va'al petach re'i aravati, or I have lain in wait at my neighbor's door. What he's saying here in verse 9 is more than a desire is meant here, action has been taken, for it implies that the adulterer waits until the husband is gone and then sneaks in to sleep with his neighbor's wife. This is what he's saying that he did not do. And he says, if I had done that, which he hasn't, then verse 10, Tifchan le'acher ishti. Then let my wife grind to another. Titchan is from tachan, to grind, and we have the cow imperfect third feminine singular from tachan, and let others ba'alecha yikra'un acherim. Let others bow down upon her. Notice here, upon her, then let others bow down. From kara, the perfect, the cow imperfect, a third common plural from kara. And so what he's saying here in verse 10, if he has committed such adultery, then let his wife become the slave or wife of another. And so verse 11, he continues, Ki hu zima, for that were a horrible crime, a heinous crime, v'hu avon pelilil, and it is really, if it were an iniquity like that, it would be then iniquity to be punished by the judges. It would be an iniquity of pelilin, of the judges. Two nouns in construct here. And what Job is saying basically is adultery was punishable by, it was a capital punishment in the earliest times. Genesis 18:24, for example. Later, the Mosaic law prescribed the same. It was a capital offense for adultery in Deuteronomy 22, verse 22. So adultery is not just a sin against one's conscience, but also against the community, seems to be the idea that Job, in Job's thought here. If he had committed such a sin, then he deserved punishment. And then in verse 12, it continues, For ki esh he al avadon tochel. For it is a fire that unto destruction consumes. Tochel is from achal. It consumes. It's like a fire. And here we have the cow imperfect third feminine singular from achal. So it's like a fire that consumes unto avadon, and would root out all my increase. B'cho tevuati tesharesh. It would root out all of my increase. And the thought here is that the sin of adultery is punished severely by God because it makes mockery of marriage, which is a symbol of God's relationship with his people. It is a fire that burns down and reaches to the netherworld, reaches to destruction or the netherworld. And so at this point, I think I'll stop here. At this point in verses 13 to 23, Job will go on to affirm that not only has he not committed adultery, has he had a pure conscience, but he affirms that he has always treated his servants justly and not oppressed the needy. And I'm going to stop here and pick up that later, beginning at verse 13 to 23. So the whole purpose of this chapter is to define, Job is defining how wonderful he has been, and yet why has God judged him so? I like the introduction to this chapter in the Sonsino books of the Bible, which reads this way: the lofty nobility of the ethical ideals expressed in this chapter has won universal admiration from modern scholars. Job solemnly affirms that he is conscious of no thought, an act which he has committed to deserve just visitation of woe, as has befallen him. He has entertained or yielded to improper sensual desire. He has abstained from all dishonesty, untruthfulness, and covetousness. He has not been tempted to adultery. These dependent, or those dependent upon him, like his servants, have been treated with patience and consideration. He has never refused help to those in need or want, taken advantage of the weak and the unprotected. He has never put his trust in material wealth or been lured from the worship of the one and only God to any type of false worship. He has never rejoiced over the misfortune of an enemy, never been inhospitable, never a hypocrite. Could any make such charges against him? Job would fearlessly bring the false indictment before his judges. His great estates had been acquired honestly and justly. And the author on page 157 then concludes with a very striking statement of what Job makes here at this point. And by the way, the author of the book of Job in the Sonsino commentaries of the Bible, let me just find the author here, is Victor Reichert, Reichert. And so basically what it concludes by saying, or what Job concludes by saying here, and the author in writing about it concludes with this. This chapter is an amazing summary of the ethics of the Bible, a dramatic portrayal of the requirements for the good life as taught in the Torah and by the prophets of Israel. So this is just an amazing chapter on what a righteous person should look like. And it reminds me of a lot of the New Testament, a lot of the writing, for example, of Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount, of Jesus teaching, Romans chapter 12. There's a lot of parallelism when we look at the New Testament. So I'm going to stop there, and we'll pick up then and continue on from that point.